So I remember during court tonight, I didn't remember last week for our other study. So we have made it through the first 15 chapters of Genesis. But before we hop into chapter 16, I'm just going to ask, are there any questions or anything you want to, like, that you've revisited or you want to throw out there? Because the reality is everything we've read up to this point is building blocks so that we can understand what we're dealing with tonight. So I'll always ask that question. Anybody got anything? All right, then Genesis chapter 16. We're flying along. We're averaging almost a chapter a week. Woo. So my first section is verses 1 and part of verse 2 is my first paragraph. So it says, now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian slave named Hagar. So she said to Abram, the Lord has kept me from having children. Go, sleep with my slave. Perhaps I can build a family through her. So, what do you notice? What questions would make you ask? What? Who said?
Argue.
He hasn't argued yet.
That was his commonplace.
So this would be what in modern times we would call a surrogacy. That because Hagar was property of Sarai. And remember do you guys remember how Hagar even came to be a part of their household? It says very clearly she's what? A servant, but not just any kind of servant. What kind of servant? Anybody remember? Egyptian. Where would they have gotten Egyptian servants from? What was that?
Egypt.
Well, yes, from Egypt. That's what. Do you remember? We were given a very clear story we've already read as to why he would have Egyptian servants. Do you remember a couple chapters ago whenever they went down to Egypt because things were kind of sparse in Canaan? And Abram says to Sarai, don't tell them you're my wife. Tell them you're my sister. And Pharaoh calls Abram on it and then gives him an offering of servants and money and animals. Hagar came into their world because of that lie that was told a couple chapters before. Why would that be significant for this story? Any thoughts?
Well, it's kind of like all the other times that someone got ahead of God and they got there's another line that later that they have to contend with because they got out of God's will. I'm not saying that's right.
So I think if I understand what you're implying is that you're saying when you cross the line once, rarely does that end the story. That oftentimes it brings complications down the line. And so here you have Sarai, who was given to Pharaoh for all intents and purposes as one of his wives. And when he realized that she was already married, when God revealed that to him, he made restitution. He did what was right. Isn't that interesting? Because normally do we think of Pharaoh as being the good guy? But in that story, Abram was the one who was deceitful, and Pharaoh was the one who did what was right. Now, out of that, Hagar is given to Sarai. She gets a lady in waiting, if you would say. And so now the notion of surrogacy is not that common to us anymore. It does happen in our culture, but it's not very common. And today, of course, if we're doing it, usually what happens is you have a version of in vitro fertilization, right? Where they get an egg and a sperm, and they put them together and they find another lady who just carries the child. But genetically, it is a child of those two parents. This is the primitive version of it. So it was, I don't know that I would say very common, but it was common. Does that make sense? Because for people at this point in history, the infant mortality rate was very high. The child mortality rate was very high. And realistically, especially for men, the mortality rate was very high because most men did not live past about 35 because of wars and battles and everything else. It's only been about the past 150 years or so where the number of men has gotten close to being equal to the number of women in society. That's just been a relatively new thing. Of course, every so often we have a major war too, and then we cut that number back again. But to your question, this is not necessarily outside of the scope of what God allows under normal circumstances. But is God allowing this? I mean, is this God's plan? No, this is Sarai taking, remember what happened last chapter? We spent a long time discussing this. What was it that God promised to do? God promised to give them the descendants, and he said, and if I don't, I'm the one who will pay the price. But Sarai, is this an act of faith or an act of fear? It's absolutely an act of fear. That she just can't have a kid of her own, and so she wants Hagar to be her surrogate. Anything else you notice? You might have to channel Kaylee back there because she's not here tonight, and I know that sometimes big shoes to fill. Anybody else notice anything, or do you have any other thoughts? I mean, we're not but just a verse and a half in here, but there's a lot here.
Well, whenever I think about that, I think it wasn't on Abram's part that they didn't have kids. It was on Sarah's part.
Or at least she believes so.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to stand up for Abram here in a second. And I'm just going to say, is there any scenario in this where Abram wins? Not really, is there? If he says, God says you're going to do it, well, then now he's thwarting Sarai's thoughts and her plans. If he goes through with it, we already know what happens. It causes strife. He has a no-win solution here. Any other thoughts, though?
All right. You probably thought, if God said it's going to happen, it's going to happen.
At least we hope so, right? I mean, up to this point, Abram has made some iffy decisions here or there. But as a whole, when it comes to what God has told him to do, for the most part, he's followed it about 75%, 80%. That's a passing grade. Solid C, right? What was that, Carol?
Good, strong, low C.
Good, strong, low C, maybe C minus. He's just barely above a C minus. And to think that this is the father of the faith, that should make you feel a little bit better when you doubt God. Any other thoughts? Well, then let's read the next paragraph. So, Abram agreed to what Sarai said. So after Abram had been living in Canaan 10 years, Sarai, his wife, took her Egyptian slave Hagar and gave her to her husband to be his wife. He slept with Hagar and she conceived. So, what do you think? What do you notice? What questions does it make you ask?
I wouldn't have done that.
I would hope that none of us in this room on either side of the equation would have done that.
Think how uncomfortable things are.
Yes. Has Hagar done anything wrong? Hagar has done nothing wrong. She was a slave of Pharaoh. Pharaoh transferred ownership of her to Abram. Abram apparently gave her to Sarai. Sarai is now giving her to Abram. I mean, yeah. How do you feel about Hagar?
I feel sorry for her.
Feel sorry for her. That's probably a fair place to start. You ever have a moment in your life where it seems like all kinds of stuff are happening to you and you had no choice in it whatsoever? It's just like the life just inflicted it upon you. That's kind of what Hagar is going through, isn't it? Any other thoughts?
Yeah.
What do you think about that middle section? It says, and she gave her to her husband to be his wife.
Does he got the wives?
He now has multiple wives. Now, probably all of us are familiar that all throughout the Old Testament, there are plenty of people who have multiple wives. But did you ever realize that at least for a time, Abram had multiple wives? What did God say at the beginning about marriage?
On one man, one woman.
On the one hand, God said he would provide Abram's descendants through Sarai. On the other hand, God said very clearly, marriage is one man and one woman. So this plan is deviating from God's plan not once, but at least in two different ways, right? Do you think this is going to end well?
No.
What was it you said earlier, Jane? When you make one decision, you usually have ripples you got to deal with later, right? One of the things I have found is it is really hard to live under God's anointing when you are also living in sin. Now, on the one hand, we tend to talk about sin in its eternal consequences, and that is very true and very real. But understand, I'm sure you all have heard sermons about this, that the reality is the word sin just means to miss the mark. It means to be outside of what the intent is. In the New Testament, it's an archery term. It's about if you're aiming at the bullseye, if you hit anywhere other than the bullseye, that's a sin. sin separates us from God. Sin separates us from God's perfect plan for our life. And if you think of it along those lines, that sin separates us from God's perfect plan, what is God's perfect plan for Abram and Sarai?
For them to have children.
For them to have children together, and that their children will be a multitude of nations and peoples, and that through them all of the world will be blessed. That's God's bullseye at this point. And they're stepping out of it. Now, sometimes sin can be just outside the bullseye. It could still actually be very good from a human perspective, but it's outside of the bullseye. Do you get what I'm saying? I can't help but use this example. You know, if you got to shoot the perpetrator, you might want two to the chest, but if you get him in the head, it's still going to do the job, right? There are times where God says, this is what I want for you, and if you do this, it's okay, but this is what I want. But is this just barely outside, or is this a pretty big deviation? Feels like a big deviation, doesn't it? I saw your face as soon as I said that. It's like, this is not a minor thing. Yeah.
He promised Abram descendants, but did he ever mention Sarai?
That's what I was gonna say. He
But
never,
because Abram, I've been thinking, well, he promised me a child that.
he never said no. That Abram would have children.
Does he mention Sarai? I thought he did too, but I could be wrong. Looking back through. Keep looking.
That your descendants, I will punish the nation that enslaves them. That was his covenant, was that he would have descendants.
So God has not mentioned explicitly that Sarai is a part of God's plan, has he?
Aren't they married by this point?
Well, yeah, they've been married for a long time.
Wouldn't it just be kind of his assumption that it would be through?
Well, and the only place is that he says, you have given me no descendants of my own, so one of my servants will be my heir. And God said, no, your servant will not be your heir. That sort of implies that it wouldn't be Hagar, but at the same time, I mean, if Hagar is one of his servants, you know what I mean? There's a little bit of a gray area there, but he never really says.
So, on the one hand, the child by Hagar, on the one hand, actually is Abram's firstborn son. On the other hand, it is a child of a servant, which, by what you just brought up from last chapter, God very clearly said it's not going to be a servant in your household. And it won't be that man in particular. It will be someone who is your flesh and blood. Now, I've been racking my brain as that was pointed out, and the more and more I think about it, we need to remember one thing. In God's economy, is divorce really a thing? No. It's permissible, but not without a lot of ripples. Now, that doesn't mean God can't overcome the ripples. Let me be really clear about this. There is only one unforgivable sin, right? That's blasphemy of the Holy Spirit. But as we're seeing, every sin can be overcome, but it's not overcome without its own ripples. But God has clearly said marriage is between one man and one woman. And Sarai is still living, is she not? So maybe this started as a conversation about surrogacy, but the moment that it becomes Hagar is now Abram's wife, we've moved into a very different realm of existence. Are you seeing that? And so because of what we know about what God believes about marriage, when God made a covenant with Abram, he wasn't single. Right? And so one of the things that Melissa and I have learned, when God makes a covenant, like when God called me into the ministry, she wasn't just an unwilling or willing tag along. She was a key part of it. She was unwilling, but it's okay because she's worked it out. Most days. Once you are married, what does it say? The two become one flesh. What God calls one to do, God is calling the one flesh to do, not one individual out of a married couple. Do you get what I'm saying with that? So I would interpret this to say that chapter 15 and really everything God has promised to Abram is to Abram and Sarai because they are married together. Period. Now that is a knit togetherness that we don't really think about or comprehend in our culture. Do you get what I'm saying with that? Too often in our culture, it's too easy for people to get married when maybe they shouldn't, and it's far too easy to get divorced before they should. Now there are definitely, and I'll be the first one to admit, we've encountered a lot of marriages that probably should have never happened in the first place, and that while the divorce was horrible, it was a far better option than them staying married. And I think God can bring good of that. And I want to make that very clear. I don't think marriage is always the worst evil. And I don't think remarriage is not something that God can sanctify. So please hear me clearly. But anybody who has been remarried or anybody who's gotten divorced knows it's ugly. And it brings ripples. That notion, sin always brings ripples. My stepmom, and many of you have met her, they've been here a couple of times, but she says, even though my mom passed away, she said, it's hard to live up to a dead woman. And so I'm just acknowledging, on the one hand, sin, sometimes we put it so high up that we don't realize what God's doing with it, but we also can't cheapen it to the point where we can just step over the line like it's no big deal. And so this is, for all intents and purposes, this is Abram taking a part of himself and tearing it away from Sarai in order to be yoked to Hagar. Do you get that? So this cannot end well. And as long as this relationship between Abram and Hagar exists, can Abram be fully within the center of God's will for his life? Anybody willing to answer that question?
Kathy said earlier, since she won't say it out loud, I'll say it for her. It appears that Abraham didn't ask God, is this the way you want me to do this?
Abram doesn't ask God at all. He just sees his no-win solution and he just takes the path of least resistance. But he doesn't realize how this is ripping him out of God's plan for his life. He's just trying to happy wife, happy life in this moment, thinking she's got it all worked out.
He messed up when he tried to put his wife off as his sister.
Oh, absolutely he did.
Then when you get to this part, it seems to me that she's the one leading this fiasco.
Absolutely. But Abram is following in his father Adam's footsteps.
Yeah, but
That's what I
they,
feel like.
they can't follow God because they've already cut him out of decision making.
Ooh. That's a very powerful statement you just made. They can't follow God in this because they've already cut him out of the decision making. I wonder how many of us have learned that lesson. Go for it, Scott.
No, I'm for it.
Oh, you've learned the lesson. Okay, fair enough. I thought maybe you were adding on to it. If we're not willing to ask God what's the best answer, then realistically, if we get the best answer, that's purely by luck, isn't it? But we don't have Abram consulting God here. We don't have Sarai consulting God here. Hagar's got no choice but to just go along with the plan because she's a servant and has no will of her own. What? Well, I mean, I guess she could throw a fit, but then she's probably out on her own without any livelihood or home or anything else. So,
Let's just say that she wasn't a willing participant.
well, there's that too. She said, who's to say that she wasn't a willing participant? I mean, let's be honest. Abram's a wealthy, powerful man. Go for it, Kenzie.
Say she didn't plant this.
Oh, Kenzie just said, who's to say she didn't plant the seed? Those wily Egyptian women. We don't know. We really don't know. But what's clear here is no one is consulting God about what's actually at the center of the bullseye. They're trying to make it up on their own. Have any of us ever been guilty of trying to make it up on our own? And I'm not asking people to raise their hands because realistically, every single one of us should be raising it right now. Read the next paragraph. When she knew she was pregnant, she began to despise her mistress. Then Sarai said to Abram, "You are responsible for the wrong I am suffering. I put my slave in your arms, and now that she knows she is pregnant, she despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me." Go for it, Kenzie.
For what she did.
She is mad for what she did, but she's still blaming him.
Abram knew that turn around and be his fault.
Like I said, whenever I first read that first paragraph, I'm like, he has no good. His only course of action, the only course of action that he didn't take was to pray to God and say, God, you need to give me a clear sign here. And then you need to make it clear to her. But he didn't do that, did he? So he is just rolling in the mud now. What else do you notice here? What about the relationship between Sarai and Hagar? Do you see how it shifted? First, Sarai says that she's my servant and I'm giving her to you for surrogacy. So this child will be mine. Then in the next paragraph, Sarai says, well, now she'll be your wife. We'll make this legitimate. And now she's saying, no, she's back to being my servant again. And it's all your fault, Abram. Go for it.
Now she's consulting God because she wants God to choose who's right and who's wrong.
Yeah, now once everything is all stirred up and the hornets are flying and buzzing and angry, then she says, may God. Now she's consulting God. Judge what's right here. And I'm pretty sure God would say, you're wrong. What else? Yeah, Jeff?
Like going with state responsibility.
Oh, there's that responsibility word. Who really wants to take responsibility for anything? Has the culture changed at all? Has humanity gotten wiser somehow?
No.
No. This is an old story. Adam shirked responsibility. Eve shirked responsibility. The serpent just had to crawl on his belly. The earth got cursed. Then everybody went evil. And now here, even God's chosen man and his wife, well, they're at war because neither of them will take responsibility for their actions. It's at this point, you guys don't know her, but in my head, I hear Chris Carr, who is with me when the last time I went through this at this level. She goes, would they just turn around and talk to God? And yet, how often do we need to hear those very same words? What else do you notice? Anything? What other question? Yeah, go for it, Carol.
Imagine me wanting to blame the man.
Okay, go for it.
With Adam. Adam was the one that was told.
Adam was the one who was told. He was also told to protect his wife.
But he could have stopped it had he done. Well, and we see this here. Abraham could have stopped it. Because God had told him it's not going to be a servant that's going to be the one I'm dealing with. Abram knew that, and yet he turned to a servant after he was told Eliezer is not the one. It's not going to be a servant. So Abram could have said, no, Sarah, we're not going that way.
He
Adam
could have
said, no, we're not going that way. And
He could have. So many times over.
It's a man's fault.
it's a man's fault.
Well, hold on.
Who am I talking to?
Let's lay this out fully though. Yes, it is the man's fault, but it's also the woman's fault for not guiding him well, for not giving good advice, for bringing bad plans.
Both cases, Eve and.
So one of the things that I have struggled with, and Melissa and I have talked about this a lot over the last 22 years, in God's economy, every individual is equal. You see this with Jesus. Men and women are equal in God's eyes, period. But in the household, God holds the man as the responsible woman. Now, I don't like a lot of the language because I feel like it's antiquated. 2,000 years ago, we don't talk that way, but they say men are the head of the house. As I was reminded, we might be the head, but the women are the neck, and the neck's what moves the head from left to right and up and down. And when we are at our best in God's economy, it's because we have done a good job of consulting with our spouse and praying about it and consulting God, and we're seeking to do what is right in God's eyes. Oftentimes what happens though is you just see people doing what they think is best. And notice we're seeing that here. There isn't a consulting of God until it's already too late, until the damage is done, until things are broken. Now, it doesn't mean that God somehow values men more than women. It's just that the buck has to stop with someone. And if you read the New Testament letters, in a household where the wife is the Christian and the husband is not, God puts the wife in charge. It's the person of faith that's supposed to be in charge. And that it actually says that a believing wife will sanctify her entire household. And that's weird for us. Because again, we're so individualistic, we expect that my actions only affect me. And what you do really is on you, and God will judge you for it. But in a household, in a family, every person's actions affect everybody else. Is that not right, Doug? You got a household of kids. Can one kid do something that it doesn't affect everybody else? It's just a reality, whether you like it or not. The sad truth is rarely do we, whether we're an adult or a kid, do we think about the consequences of our actions. Rarely do we stop and think. And if a good outcome does happen, then we celebrate and think it's just a coincidence. So on the one hand, you're not wrong, Carol. He is the one who has been talking to God. He is the one who has heard very clearly what God says the plan is. It was his job to communicate God's plan to Sarai and make sure that she understood it and believed it. We see the same thing with Adam. But what's very clear in the story with Adam and Eve, Adam doesn't correct her when she starts to deviate from what God said. And Abram doesn't correct Sarai where she starts to deviate. And so the whole thing really just unravels. So I want to say very clearly that while, yes, I believe in God's understanding of a biblical household, it's not that men are somehow better. It's just someone has to be responsible. The sad truth is that most of us men have been running from responsibility since Adam. We just have. Most of the godliest people I've met have been women. Now, unfortunately, that doesn't always translate, but we're working on that. So, to a certain degree, you're not wrong. But that doesn't let Sarai off the hook. The only one who, from what we can tell, Kinsey, that is innocent right now, from what we can tell, is Hagar. We don't see anything that while she could have planted the seeds, while she might be, Kathy, very complicit in this, I get to move from being a servant to now I get to be his wife of a man with power and influence and wealth, and she might be very complicit, but from the law of the land of this day, right now, she's innocent. Anything else we notice? Anything else this discussion stirring up?
I wonder if Abram was lustful after her because he didn't give up,
There is that too.
resist. He went right for it.
She might have been this wonderful Egyptian beauty that it was hard for him to take his eyes off of. And then when Sarai says, here you go, it's like, what? Yes, maybe I will. What?
Good idea.
Good idea. Since you insist. What's clear, though, again, is that they don't consult God until it's too late.
Sarah heard that covenant from the very beginning.
She should have.
Let her alone, because she laughed.
Well, we haven't got to that part yet.
Oh, okay, sorry.
You're jumping ahead just a little bit. Let's read the next sentence. I guess it's just one verse. Verse 6. Your slave is in your hands, Abram said. Do with her whatever you think best. Then Sarai mistreated Hagar, so she fled from her. Anybody think this is Abram's shining moment?
It's kind of, well, she ate the apple. She offered it to me. It's giving that.
It does give a lot of that Adam shirking blame to Eve thing all over again, doesn't it? She's your servant. You're the one who gave her to me. You're the one complaining about it. You do what you're going to do. Is Abram taking any responsibility? No. Is there any part of this where you look at Sarai though and you are thinking she's the hero of the story?
She's the main character, but she's not the hero.
She is the main character of this story, but she is not the hero. What were you saying?
It makes her sound like a witch.
Makes her sound like a witch. And other words that rhyme with it.
Yes.
Verse 7. The angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the desert. It was the spring that is beside the road to Shur. And he said, Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? So there's a handful of things here. What do you want to discuss?
He labeled her as slave Sarah. Like that's part of her identity.
This person very clearly labels that she is a slave of Sarai. That is her reality.
He didn't say made of.
Didn't say
He didn't say
maid
mother.
of Sarai, doesn't say wife of Abram, doesn't say any of that. Those are important facts. There are some circumstances of your existence that are just beyond your control. You can't control who your parents are. You can't control who your family is. You just have to deal with them sometimes. There are some times where, because of the nature of our world and our existence, sometimes your job is your job. You could quit, but let's face it, sometimes it's really hard to get another job. John, I'm bringing you on to the spotlight. When you're a farmer, your land is your land. Very rarely can you trade it, right?
Yes.
Usually if you're wanting to trade, it's not going to go favorably for you.
But how you treat it also reflects on how it responds.
Part of what I think God says in this is exactly what Melissa was just making the point of. How you handle your circumstances can either make it better or worse than what you currently have. Is Hagar running from Sarah going to make anything any better? No. Running from it doesn't change anything. She is a single woman pregnant in the middle of the wilderness. Is this a good situation for anybody? And more than likely, because she was a slave, she's probably tattooed to show that she's a slave. And everyone knows what that looks like. It was true in the Egyptian society. It was true in the Canaanite society. They've seen this. Luckily, it wasn't like what they did in some of the worst parts of the South where they branded humans, but it was still pretty bad. What else do you notice here? Anybody?
Well, at least she listened to the Lord. the angel of the
Well,
Lord.
she's listening to whoever this is. This phraseology, have we seen this person before? The angel of the Lord. We haven't seen this yet, have we?
Does he have more than one angel?
Well, first of all, we need to discuss that a little bit because I want to make clear a couple of things. What's an angel?
Messenger.
Messenger.
Ring of spinning.
It could be a lot of different things.
Size multiple.
What we see in other places are creatures that defy understanding. In Ezekiel, you get rings upon rings, and that's the messenger. I think in Daniel, you get something similar, but they have wings. In Isaiah, we get living creatures with multiple faces. But in general, the thing that I want you to understand is an angel, angelos, just means messenger. These do not necessarily have to have wings, and they are not necessarily pretty women, like all our statues of them are, and they're not little babies, fat, chubby babies with wings.
And you know, most of the time, when an angel appears, they have to tell the person, don't be afraid.
Almost universally, when an angel of the Lord appears, their first words are, don't be afraid. So more than likely, they aren't something pretty to look at.
Or they're awfully big.
Or they're awfully foreboding or something.
Well, they go, oh, they're there too.
And they just often just kind of materialize out of nowhere. Beam me up, Scotty. Or beam them down, God. But look at the word, at least in my translation, the very next word, the angel of the Lord found.
What are you looking for?
He was looking for her. Do you realize that God is always looking for you?
The hound of heaven.
Yeah, there's that poet and poem, the Hound of Heaven, who chases after us.
Leaves the 99.
Leaves the 99. Of course, the thing I always like to remember, people, if the other 99 were good sheep, they were following along behind. Hagar is seen by God, and Hagar is pursued by God. And God does not all of a sudden diminish her situation. He says, Hagar, slave of Sarai. What does he ask her?
Where are you going?
And
where'd you come from?
Where did you come from and where are you going? Do you realize how important those questions are?
She never answered the first question.
She doesn't, does she? Now we have, I guess I should read the next,
Yes. No, instead of running away from.
she goes,
Doesn't say where she came from.
I'm running away from my mistress Sarai, she answered, out of the presence of my mistress.
I guess that could be a problem.
It's kind of a from. But she's not being completely honest, but she did mostly answer the question. We'll give her a solid B minus for her answer. How's that? Is that, Carol, does that work?
Yeah.
About B minus? She's doing better than Abram and Sarai are here, but not by much.
You know, though, in 10, which we haven't got there yet, it just really impresses me that the angel of the Lord says, I will give.
So let's read 9 and 10.
Just your run-of-the-mill angel.
So let's read 9 and 10.
I will give.
Then the angel of the Lord told her, go back to your mistress and submit to her. The angel added, I will increase your descendants so much that they will be too numerous to count. So I'm going to ask this question again. Who is the angel of the Lord? Yes, John.
AI says it could be Jesus.
AI says it could be Jesus.
It's ever referred to the angel in the New Testament.
There is
referred to an angel.
When you move to after Jesus is incarnate amongst us, yes, for once AI was theologically correct. That doesn't happen very often. Be cautious with AI. But you're right. This is very clearly, this can't just be a messenger from a normal messenger from the Lord, Because does a messenger from the Lord have the authority to say, I will increase? Who gives the increase? God is the only one who gives the increase. And this is a physical being talking to Hagar, is it not? So if God's the only one who can give the increase, and this is a physical being, who does this have to be?
Jesus.
It has to be Jesus. AI, surprisingly, is doing better than Hagar and Abram and Sarah.
It wasn't my idea.
It was your idea. When you see this phrase, the angel of the Lord, it is almost always the pre-incarnate Christ. Now think about that for just a second. If this isn't just the angel of the Lord, but Jesus, think about what you said about leaving the 99. Jesus searches for her and finds her. And Jesus asks, where have you come from? And where are you going? How does that change this story?
Crystal says, I was surprised to read that the angel is a man. I guess I never thought about it being, the angel being a man or a woman. And also Hagar didn't know she was pregnant until she was just told.
Ooh. Well, in verse 4, it does say when she knew she was pregnant. But what's very clear in this is what she assumed, God now confirmed. How do you feel about this story? This is, realistically, this is the first time outside of Genesis 1 where we hear the word speaking, right? This is the second time that we have Christ.
So isn't a lot of this though rhetorical? I mean, because the angel of the Lord, whoever it is, would have known where she was at. So it's not he found her. He knew where she was at. And whoever asked him these questions knew the answers to these questions before they asked them.
I think it was more of her. Yeah,
So-
acknowledging that she was, had,
To your point, what the ladies up front are saying, God often asks us questions that he already knows the answer to, so that we'll be truthful.
when he asked, where is your brother?
When he asked Cain, where is your brother? When he asked Adam and Eve, why were you hiding? Like I said back then, when we discussed that chapter, it's kind of like whenever you have a 3-year-old playing hide and seek and they try and hide under a paper towel. Where are you at?
Trying to hide the cookie that they stole.
Or trying to hide the cookie that they're trying to eat really fast before you notice they got the cookie in their mouth. If this is not just any angel, if this angel of the Lord is truly Christ, can she hide from him at all? No. Does he need to ask her the question, where are you coming from and where are you going? No, he knows. The questions God asks us is not for his benefit, it's for ours.
Rhetorical.
What?
It's a rhetorical question.
It's a rhetorical question. Are you willing to be honest with yourself about what your situation is? Because let's be clear, we all know this. If you're a parent, grandparent, aunt, uncle, you know this, that until that child you're working with is willing to be honest about the circumstances, it's really hard to get them to a good solution. Right? Anything else you noticed so far, or do I need to keep read 11 and 12? Add a little bit more to the hopper. Let's see what 11 says. The angel of the Lord also said to her, you are now pregnant, and you will give birth to a son. You shall name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard your misery. He will be a wild donkey of a man, His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. And he will live in hostility towards all his brothers.
Well, now she knows it's a boy.
I'd be ready to abort.
At this point, it's not that easy, but
It doesn't sound like good news.
No. But if he's the only one by her and there's other children by Sarai and Abram, then he's gonna be an outsider.
it's mixed news. She hears very clearly she's having a son, which for this point in human history, sons were important. Remember what I talked about the father's household and the firstborn son being able to be the ones who could have their own household, and potentially this provides an escape for her to get out from underneath Sarai and Abram, right? It also says very clearly, he's not going to be the only one. He's going to have siblings of some kind. Now, he's going to war with his siblings, but who doesn't war with their siblings? I don't know. They might have a good relationship with their siblings.
Now that they're moved out.
Now that they're moved out, and you're the only one. You two seem to be getting along right now. Has that always been the case? Most of the time, right? It was, or if it was, it was far enough back you've forgotten it by now, right?
I could be kind of mean at times, I'll have.
You can be mean when
Back.
back then. So on the one hand, God just very clearly says, you're pregnant. He confirms it again. You're going to have a son. Good news. You're going to name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard of your misery. God sees her hardship. That's an important distinction, isn't it? It's not just that God found her. It's that God went searching for her, he found her, and he knows her situation. He knows she's a servant that doesn't really have full control over her life. He realizes her misery. Do you see how much our God is a God who cares for us? But he also doesn't hide the reality that this situation is not really good and it's probably not going to get any better. Yeah.
So is Ishmael the father of Islam? And if so, that pretty much, like even his descendants are constantly at war.
So Ishmael and his descendants become the fathers of the Arab peoples. The Arab peoples are the ones who are often at war with the Israelites, and they are the same people who will eventually give rise to what is now Islam. Absolutely, all of that is true. In fact, Islam would say they are descendants of Abram, and that as descendants of Ishmael, they are the ones who should inherit it. And that's why they can be mean to and subjugate and terrorize the Israelites, because they're the usurpers. So on the one hand, God acknowledges it's not good, and it may not get better, but he is the God who sees her, and he is the God who pursues her, and he is the God who has found her. Anything else you notice in here? Any other questions you want to ask?
It's almost like a preview of like Jacob and Esau, because the firstborn is not getting what the firstborn son is supposed to get.
We are going to see this happen time and time again. The culture says the firstborn son is the one that should receive the lion's share. And yet the one that God chooses to work through is often not the firstborn. Noah's not the firstborn. Abram's not the firstborn. We're going to see Isaac is not the firstborn. Jacob is not the firstborn. Joseph and Judah are not the firstborn. The culture might say one thing, God's plan may be something different. And just because the culture says it's okay, doesn't mean that it's within the center of God's plan. And man, do we need to hear that today. Think how different our world might be if we would learn that lesson. Am I going to pull that down off the shelf? What?
Move on.
She's telling me to move on. Okay. Next verses, 13 and 14. She gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her. You are the God who sees me. For she said, I have now seen the one who sees me. That is why the well was called Beer Lahairoi, and it is still there between Kadesh and Bered. You ever wish that you could encounter the God who sees you? You ever had a moment where you felt unseen, unnoticed, passed over? Yeah, go for it, Danny.
What God do you think that she was familiar with before this?
Yeah. So here's the thing. Where's she from? She's from Egypt. Do the Egyptian gods care about individual people? Do the Egyptian gods care about slaves? They only cared about the king and the hierarchy and the priests and the people who made them happy. Most of the people would have never expected, most of the Egyptian people would have never expected their gods to see them. They're in the land of Canaan. I've done a lot of research on the Canaanite deities. They're no better. They're pretty evil, in fact, most of the time. If anything, you try to keep the gods of peace so they don't pay attention to you. You don't want their attention on you. Yet our God sees her. And really, as a whole, yes, it's going to have some negative consequences, but he gives her a blessing, doesn't he? Yeah, whatever gods she might have known to call on before, they would not be like Beer Lahairoi, the God who sees me. What else do you notice in here? Any other thoughts?
She said she's seen him.
Yeah. She says she has seen him. I thought people couldn't look at God. Have you heard that before?
I don't think it's meant that way. I think understands a better word.
Say a little bit more. Explain.
Well, she saw the entity that was there apparently. But when she says that he sees her, in today's culture, we use that sometimes to mean that somebody really, really gets it, gets where I'm coming from, gets what I mean. So I don't know.
And to that point, the Hebrew word that is used here is one for to see and understand. I serve the God who sees me and knows me and understands me.
And loves me anyway.
And loves me anyway. Doesn't it sound like the gospel? I thought the God of the Old Testament was angry and vengeful and hateful and mean. Do you guys see that God here, or are we seeing something different? Somebody got something? Let's finish the chapter. So Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram gave the name Ishmael to the son she had born. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore him Ishmael. So what do we know? What's this mean?
He named him what the angel of the Lord told her to name him.
So Abram named the child
Which means he claims him.
what the angel of the Lord told Hagar to name him, which means she went back.
She obeyed.
She obeyed, and Abram, in naming the child, has claimed the child. In the ancient world, when a father bestowed a name upon a child, that was them laying claim that this child is mine. Now, some of you guys aren't, many of you aren't in the other Bible study we're doing, but on Thursday morning, we were discussing last week about the blind Bartimaeus. You know that story? Bartimaeus is not really a name. Bar is the Hebrew word for son of, and Timaeus is actually a Greek name. It means the righteous one or righteous. So this man was the son of a Hebrew wife and a Greek father. And he wasn't given a name. Everybody just knew, hey, it's so-and-so's son. He never actually gave him a name. Names have meaning. Names have power. And in that story, the fact that a name wasn't given meant that everybody else said, that's so-and-so's son. And they didn't mean it as a good thing because apparently he wasn't a very good dad, even though his name meant the righteous one. In this instance, Hagar goes back and tells the story. And notice, remember what I said earlier about the God's household? The man might be the head, but the wife is the neck. And in this instance, Hagar, Abram's wife, told him how to be faithful to God. And Abram obeyed. Do you see that?
The mistress was actually better influence on Abram than his wife.
In this story, the mistress was actually a better influence on Abram than his own wife was. God didn't save them from the Jerry Springer level drama, but he did at least bring some kind of good out of it. Thoughts? God will save us from our sin and the eternal consequence, but he never removes from us the consequences of it. Which is why it's always better to consult God first. What do you guys think of this story now?
It seems to me that so far, it's the men who are given the task of having a large family. But in this one, Sarai kind of takes over and makes that choice. So is she, I don't know, it just seems like everything would have been different if she had just trusted God and not tried to make this picture the way she wanted it. Because he was 85 years old. He might have kind of given up on that.
So I'm going to put my bookmark here and I'm going to turn back. And I'm going to read you something. Genesis chapter 3. Verse 16 says, to the woman he said, I will make your pains in childbirth very severe. With painful labor, you will give birth to children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. Do you remember that? I don't know that, like I said back then when we studied that, I don't know that God was cursing them. God was pronouncing the truth of what was now the reality. In God's economy, men and women are equal. But the man, the head of the household is the man, and ultimately he's the one responsible. When the man does his job, things go well. When the woman does her job, things go well. When they work together, things go really well. Have we seen any of them really working together up to this point? At best, probably what we've seen is them not really working against one another. Is that fair enough? Do you see what I'm saying? They're not really working together, but they're just not thwarting the other person. At best, it's a little bit of a Cold War. And you see this reality where God gives the commands to the men. You're right. But apparently, they're not explaining it well. They're not telling it. Maybe they're not sharing it at all. Maybe Abram hasn't said anything to Sarai. Maybe she has given up all hope. But the other side of it is we don't see her going to God either. You got something, Derek? Okay.
I got something.
Go for it, Leon.
Well, it says back in verse 1 of 16, Sarai went to Abraham and said, the Lord has kept me from having children. So is that something that she felt the Lord had told her? Or else was she just blaming the Lord for her not having children?
Yeah. Okay. So we don't have anywhere in this story where we see Sarai actually reaching out to God to ask him questions, do we? So maybe she has been praying, maybe she's not. But right here at the beginning, she's blaming God.
Now, did she do that to convince Abram to do what she told him to do, or want to ask him to do?
Every time I study this story, I get more and more confused as to who is actually doing anything close to right here. Sarai blames God. She gives Abram a bad scenario. Abram doesn't ask God. Abram just says, well, happy wife, happy life. And then all of a sudden, maybe he likes her and she's pretty, and things they just snowball really, really quickly. And this goes nowhere good fast. But it seems that Sarai isn't just saying that God has rejected her. Is she not kind of, with that statement, rejecting his covenant with Abram? I mean, she's rejecting what God said in chapter 15 that we studied last week.
Well, later we see she laughs at him when he says,
Yeah, here in a couple of well, at the rate we're going, it'll at least be a couple of weeks. It might be 3 at this rate. She laughs. She does not believe God.
he says, why'd she laugh?
I think too often we put on a veneer of belief when we're filled with more doubt than we want to admit. We read these stories, we read God's word, and we hear these truths. So we put on a veneer of belief, but we allow our experience to tell us something different. I think we never should underestimate the deceiver's ability to cause us to doubt God.
But the enemy will put everything that he can there to make you doubt what
He will throw
God has
everything.
spoken to you about.
I've been listening to an audiobook. I'm not going to throw them under the bus of who gave it to me, but it's taking an interesting take on the Nephilim and God's judgment on them. But one of the things that I think this book is doing well is we don't fully comprehend our enemy's hatred of us because we have said yes to God when he chose to fight against God. You know, there's that old saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? Well, the friend of my enemy is my enemy. And the simple fact that you are saying yes to God and what God's plan is means you are moving the enemy further and further to his demise. And every step along the way, we may not necessarily see the enemy actually coming into play, but we can see his work, his handiwork. Just like when we look back, we can see God's handiwork. They are both at play in this. The enemy is trying to destroy the seed of Eve that will ultimately cause his destruction. And God is trying to bring blessing to his image bearers that they might bear image to him across the globe. So I think very clearly the enemy has gotten to Sarai. And to a certain degree, she's let him. The whole situation is really sad because the angel of the Lord came to Hagar. You don't think the angel of the Lord would have come to Sarai or Abram if they had just asked? I mean, that's a little presumptuous of me, but I'm pretty sure if I'm reading this correctly, if they'd have just turned and said, hey, God, this isn't quite adding up. What's the next step? Now, the story would be a whole lot less interesting, but so in our last 4 minutes, what's this mean for you? Does this story have any implications on your life?
I think that's why scriptures that tell for us to always to be in prayer, pray without ceasing, and in everything give thanks, and all the different things like that that are in the Bible makes it so much more important.
I tell people, this book right here is not God, but it is a flashing neon sign to a relationship with the God behind this book. Sometimes we can get so caught up in this book that we fail to see the God behind it. But sometimes we can get so caught up in our lives that we fail to see the God behind us. God is there waiting patiently. And any time that we cry out to him, he will hear us and we will be found by him. And this story always reminds me of that. At any point in time, could you imagine how different the story would be if at some point Sarah had just cried out to God and said, hey, explain to me what's going on here? If Abram had said, you know, Sarah's got this plan, God, is this going to work? If Hagar had said, how am I supposed to handle this situation where I've got a no-win situation? At any point, if they had just turned to God, it could have been very different. And in case you don't,
Maybe the title of it is impatience.
impatience,
And I mean, I feel that if it doesn't come by Tuesday, then I'm gonna need to think
So-
about what's a plan B or something.
so what I remember from being a kid and in the world of Rocky and Bullwinkle, this could be this episode is entitled Impatience, or What Happens When You Don't Turn to God. Right? They always had two names to every episode.
You know, it also appears that they did not have any godly counsel from the people around them either.
Yeah, there's that too. When you've got a problem, do you surround yourself with godly counsel, or do you seek people who might not necessarily lead you closer to God?
More than likely, you seek people that would agree with you.
Yeah, there's that.
Tell you what you want to hear.
To your point earlier, Carol, about men being to blame,
It's that, what?
at the beginning of the story of Esther, you have the king wanting to see his wife, and he's not making a very godly or good decision, but what do you expect from a pagan anyway? So he goes to his advisors and said, what do I do about my obstinate wife? And of course, his advisors, do they give him good advice? No, they give him bad advice. Too often we seek people who are just going to affirm our position anyway, instead of people who are going to lead us into wisdom. And of course, if you believe scripture, which I kind of do, there's that thing. It's kind of my job. Job and Proverbs tell us that wisdom is from God. And God seems to say, if you seek me, you will find me. Any final thoughts? Then let's pray. Abba, Father, this story is intriguing and mostly disheartening. And the truth of the matter is, Lord, often this story is our story. Maybe not to this extent, but Lord, the reality of us being distracted by our life and trying to make our own way forward instead of seeking you. And yet, Lord, you are the God who sees us. You are the God who understands us. You are the God who knows us. And Lord, you will make the best that we allow you to out of our lives. So Lord, may we be a people who turn to you first. Lord, may we be a people who seek your wisdom first. And Lord, may we be a people who shine your light into the world, so that the world might find you through us. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Next week, we will not be meeting because it's Ash Wednesday. So in 2 weeks, we will pick up with chapter 17.
That's what it's happening.